You've had a thought move through you faster than words could ever catch it. A flash of fear before you knew why. A flicker of want before you could name it. Somebody asks you what you're thinking and you pause. You have to translate. But translate from what? That pause is not empty. It's a fossil, a living one sitting inside your skull right now, left over from a version of you that existed long before a single word was ever spoken. Think about how often this happens. You flinch away from something before you consciously register what it was. You recognize a friend's walk from across a parking lot before you could describe a single feature that gave it away. You know, somehow, that a room feels wrong the moment you step into it. None of that runs through words first. It runs through something older, faster, and far less talkative. Because here's the strange part. For most of human history, there was no language at all, no sentences, no grammar, no names for hunger, or danger, or love. And yet those humans were not blank. They were not waiting around for words to arrive so they could finally start thinking. They were already thinking, constantly, vividly. So what were they thinking in? Start with what you already know, but rarely notice. Right now, somewhere in your body, there is a thought forming that has no words attached to it yet. Maybe it's the shape of a room you're picturing. Maybe it's the feel of a decision your gut has already made before your mouth catches up. Psychologists call this pre-linguistic cognition, and it never fully went away. You still use it every single day. You just paper over it with language so quickly you forget it was ever there. Elizabeth Spelke, a cognitive scientist at Harvard, spent decades studying something remarkable. Babies who cannot speak a single word. And yet, through careful experiments tracking where infants look and how long they stare, Spelke found that these preverbal children already understand objects, numbers, and even basic physics. A 6-month-old expects a ball rolling behind a screen to keep existing. A 6-month-old is surprised when two objects appear to pass through each other. No one taught them this. No word explained it to them. They arrived already knowing it. Spelke calls this core knowledge. Think of it as the operating system your brain shipped with, long before language ever got installed. And if a baby has it, so did every human who came before language existed at all. Now push that further back. Imagine a small group of your ancestors deep in the past, long before any spoken language had formed. No verbs, no nouns, no way to say tomorrow, or dangerous, or mine. Were they lost in some kind of mental fog? Almost certainly not. They tracked animals across terrain that changed by the hour. They remembered which plants would kill them and which would heal them. They read the weight of a silence in the grass and knew instantly that something was wrong. That is not fog, that is thinking. It's just thinking without a narrator. Consider what that kind of mind actually had to hold. A map of every waterhole across dozens of miles, updated by season. A memory of which berries caused sickness 3 years earlier. An instant read on whether another group approaching in the distance meant kinship or danger. None of that required a single sentence. It required something more, like a live, constantly updating model of the world, built entirely out of images, sensations, and expectations. Call it thought in its rawest form, running on pure pattern instead of grammar. And this wordless mind wasn't working alone. It was working inside a group every single day for hundreds of thousands of years. Long before your ancestors could ask each other a question, they had to know instantly whether the person sitting across the fire was a friend or a threat. They had to read intention off a face, off a posture, off the tiny shift in someone's shoulders before an argument turned violent. That skill has a name now. Researchers call it theory of mind, the ability to understand that another creature has beliefs, feelings, and intentions of their own. Psychologist Michael Tomasello spent much of his career comparing human children to our closest living relatives, chimpanzees. What he found was striking. Chimpanzees are remarkably intelligent. They use tools, they plan, they remember grudges for years. But human children, even before they can speak a full sentence, do something chimpanzees almost never do on their own. They point at something just to share the experience of looking at it together. Not to get food, not to solve a problem, just to say, without any words at all, look at this with me. Tomasello calls this shared intentionality, and he believes it may be one of the true engines behind everything that made humans different. Now imagine that drive sitting inside a group of early humans huddled around a controlled fire, something your ancestors mastered hundreds of thousands of years before written history began. Controlling fire wasn't just about warmth, it reorganized the entire rhythm of the day. Nights that used to mean danger and stillness suddenly became a space for something new. Faces lit orange, sitting close together. No immediate immediate threat to react to, no food to chase, just presence, just each other. Some researchers believe this firelit downtime may have been one of the earliest arenas for complex, wordless social bonding, the ancestor of everything that would eventually become storytelling. The archaeological record backs this up in ways that are easy to miss if you're only picturing cavemen grunting at each other. Long before any evidence of complex spoken language, your ancestors were already shaping stone hand axes with a symmetry that took real planning to achieve. That symmetry wasn't accidental. Making a hand axe like that requires holding an image of the finished object in your mind, then working backward through dozens of precise strikes to get there. That's not a reflex, that's planning. That's imagination in the most literal sense of the word. Even more striking, at Blombos Cave in South Africa, researchers uncovered pieces of ochre engraved with deliberate geometric patterns, dated to roughly 100,000 years ago. Nobody knows exactly what those markings meant to the people who made them, but the fact that they existed at all tells you something important. Somebody looked at a blank surface and decided to put meaning onto it on purpose, in a form built to last. That is symbolic thought, and symbolic thought does not require spoken words to exist. It just requires a mind capable of representing one thing with another. So by the time actual grammar and full spoken language arrived, human minds were already doing something remarkably close to what you call abstract reasoning. They were just doing it silently, one skull at a time, with no way to compare notes. But if full spoken language came so late, how did anyone communicate anything complex before it? One influential answer comes from psychologist Michael Corballis, who argued for years that language may not have started as sound at all. It may have started as gesture, a pointed finger, a hand shaped like a spear being thrown, a sweeping arm tracing the path an animal had run. Long before the vocal tract had evolved the fine control needed for rapid speech, hands were already free, expressive, and watched closely by everyone nearby. Corballis pointed to a simple piece of evidence hiding in plain sight. Watch anyone tell a story today, in any culture, in any language, and their hands move constantly, often shaping the exact meaning their words are carrying. That's not decoration. Some researchers believe it's a living echo of a gestural system that came first, with spoken words layering on top of it only later, once the vocal anatomy caught up to what the hands had already been doing for a very long time. There's a modern experiment that makes this almost impossible to deny. In Nicaragua, in the 1980s, deaf children were brought together for the first time in a new school. None of them had ever been taught a formal sign language. Their families mostly used simple gestures at home. But when these children were placed together, something extraordinary happened. Within a single generation, they built an entire language from nothing. Grammar, structure, recursion, all of it, invented by children with no model to copy. Linguist Ansenga studied this emerging language for years, and what she found reshaped how researchers think about the human mind. The children didn't need language to have complex thoughts first. The thoughts were already there, waiting. Language simply gave those thoughts a shape they could hand to someone else. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. Thought is not the same thing as language. Language is a delivery system. It's the truck, not the cargo. And it wasn't just abstract ideas riding in that cargo. Emotion almost certainly came first too. A mother comforting a frightened child, a group tensing together at the same unseen threat, a shared stillness after a loss. None of that needed a word to be real or to be understood by everyone present. Long before anyone could say I'm sorry, humans were already reading grief on another person's face and responding to it, body to body, with no translation required at all. Before Sengas's Nicaraguan children ever built their new sign language, they were already using something researchers call home sign. Alone in their individual homes, without any formal language around them, deaf children instinctively invented small systems of gestures to communicate basic needs and ideas. Psychologist Susan Golden Meadow has spent her career studying these home sign systems, and she found they weren't random flailing. They had order, consistent structures, a kind of grammar built alone by a single child, with nobody to teach them how. So picture that. A child isolated from any language, still organizing thought into structure, still building meaning, still reaching for someone. That is what your ancestors likely carried for hundreds of thousands of years before spoken language ever existed. Not silence, not emptiness, a private, wordless architecture of thought, constantly working, constantly making sense of the world, just without a way to export it yet. What would that have felt like from the inside? Probably something closer to pure experience than to internal monologue. No looping voice narrating every decision, just direct contact with hunger, cold, danger, warmth, belonging. Some researchers believe this may be closer to how many animals experience the world right now. Not less intelligent, just less narrated, and that reframes something you might have taken for granted your entire life. The voice in your head, the one narrating your day right now, reading these very words in your mind as if you're hearing them, is not thinking itself. It's the report of thinking, a translation layer, laid on top of something older and quieter. You can still feel that older layer if you pay attention. The moment right before you find the right word. The pause when someone asks how you feel, and you genuinely don't know where to start. That's not you failing to think. That's you catching yourself between two systems, the ancient one and the one language built on top of it. One spoken language did emerge in humans, probably somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 years ago, depending on which researchers you ask. It didn't replace this older architecture. It layered on top of it. Suddenly, thought could travel outside a single skull for the first time in the history of the planet. A parent could warn a child about a danger the child had never personally seen. A hunter could describe a route across land she had never walked. An idea could outlive the person who had it. That's the real shift language brought. Not the ability to think, the ability to transmit thinking. Before language, every human mind was its own sealed island. However rich and detailed the thoughts on that island might be, language built the first bridges between those islands. And once the bridges existed, thought stopped dying with the thinker. It started accumulating, passing forward, compounding across generations in a way no other species on this planet has ever managed. Which means the real ancient inheritance sitting inside your skull is not the voice narrating your life right now. It's the wordless pre-verbal mind underneath it, still doing most of the actual work, still reading danger and comfort and connection before a single word gets involved. Language is the newest tenant in a very old house. You can see the echo of this everywhere if you know where to look. A musician who feels a chord change is wrong before she can explain the theory behind it. A driver who slams the brakes before consciously seeing the child step off the curb. A mother who wakes seconds before her baby cries. In every one of these moments, the ancient wordless mind gets there first, and language, if it shows up at all, only arrives afterward to write the caption. Even grief works this way. People who have lost someone often describe a wave of feeling that hits before any thought forms around it. A heaviness in the chest that language only catches up to hours later. When someone finally asks how they're doing, and the words have to be built from scratch, the feeling was never missing. The sentence was just late. Think about meditation, or the strange calm some people describe after long stretches of silence, no phone, no conversation, no inner narration running the show. Many describe it as a kind of return, not to nothing, but to something older than words. A direct contact with the world that language usually stands in front of. That's not a mystical accident. That may be the oldest operating system in your brain, still there, still fully functional, just rarely given the chance to run without interruption. Even the way you learn a new physical skill echoes this ancient wordless mind. Watch someone learning to ride a bicycle, or throw a proper punch, or thread a needle for the first time. Explaining it in words barely helps. The body has to feel it, fail at it, adjust and feel it again, entirely below the level of language, until one day the movement simply works. No sentence taught it that. Something older did. So the next time you feel something before you can name it, don't rush to translate it too quickly. That gap you feel right there before language catches up is not a malfunction. It's the oldest part of you still running exactly the way it always has, quietly working, long before anyone ever needed a word for it at all.